They say a job is just a job, but sometimes it becomes the beginning of a nightmare you'll never forget. Laura Bailey never dreamed of luxury. She was 21, juggling night classes at community college and waitressing part-time, just trying to stay afloat. Then she saw the ad. House assistant wanted. Must be detail-oriented, punctual, discreet, live-out position, excellent pay. The address? Bellevue, one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in Seattle. She read the ad 5 times before deciding to go for it. The Carlisle estate looked like something out of a glossy magazine. 2 stories, floor-to-ceiling windows, a lawn trimmed with surgical precision, and wrought iron gates with a security camera blinking like a watchful eye. The moment she stepped inside, it felt like she'd landed on another planet. White marble floors, signed paintings on the walls, a kitchen fit for a Hollywood caterer, and the clinging scent of jasmine air freshener that somehow made its way into her clothes. She was greeted by Mrs. Amanda Carlisle, a tall, elegant woman with a chill in her smile and makeup so perfect it felt painted on. Her manners were polished, her words clipped. "Laura? Good. Don't touch the offices, and don't bother ironing clothes. That's Mariana's job, and please, no music. We value quiet here." Amanda looked at her like she smelled of gas station coffee and small-town desperation. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that James Carlisle, Amanda's husband, treated Laura like a human being. He walked into the living room on Laura's 3rd day while she was mopping the floor. Tall, shirt untucked, no tie, sleeves rolled up with that tired but gentle look some people get when they've seen too much of the world. "You must be Laura," he said. "Yes, sir. Sorry, I'll be out of your way in a second. It's fine. Don't worry about it." He didn't just notice her. He saw her. Not as part of the furniture, not as a shadow in the corner, but as a person. The next day, he handed her a coffee, vanilla latte, her favorite. "Picked it up on the way. Thought you might like one." Her hands trembled as she took the cup. She tried not to think about how everything in her life was probably about to spiral out of control. And then came Sunday. 9 a.m. sharp. The storm hit. "Laura!" Amanda's voice sliced through the house like broken glass. She stood at the top of the staircase, holding a small empty velvet box. "Where are my earrings?" Laura blinked. "I'm sorry? My diamond earrings. Tiffany, I took them off by the sink in the upstairs bathroom. You cleaned in there yesterday, didn't you?" "Yes, ma'am, but I didn't see them." Within minutes, everyone was gathered in the living room. Amanda, James, Mariana the housekeeper, the security guard, and Laura standing in the center with a face like chalk. Amanda didn't yell. She smiled. "Let's just make sure, dear. Would you mind opening your bag? You don't have anything to hide, right?" It was a trap. Laura could feel it in her bones, but what choice did she have? She opened her purse in silence. The earrings were right on top, like someone had just placed them there. Mariana gasped. The security guard's mouth tightened. Amanda raised her eyebrows with theatrical amusement. "Well, isn't that predictable?" Laura stood frozen, staring at the sparkling earrings she'd never seen before in her life. Her throat burned. I don't know how. These aren't mine. I swear I didn't." But James had already stepped forward. He wasn't looking at her. He stared past her, face stone cold. "I think you should leave," he said quietly. "Right now." Silence. Then footsteps. The security guard held the door. Laura walked out into the morning sun like a ghost. She couldn't feel the ground under her feet. She didn't cry. Not yet. The tears came later, on the bus ride home, where she sat staring at her reflection in the scratched window, convinced everyone around her saw her as a thief. And worse, convinced no one would ever believe she didn't do it. What she didn't know was that this was only the beginning. The house smelled like coffee and quiet. Sarah Bailey looked at her daughter like she was seeing her for the first time all over again. Laura sat slumped at the kitchen table, like someone had turned her inside out and barely bothered to put her back together. Her eyes were vacant. Her cheeks still held the tracks of dried tears. Her hair hung loose, and she kept tucking the same strand behind her ear, over and over again, like muscle memory had taken over where willpower failed. "Mom," her voice was hoarse, like she'd been trying to speak through sandpaper. "I didn't do it, I swear." Sarah didn't answer right away. She just sat down beside her and placed a gentle hand on her daughter's back. "I know, sweetheart. Of course I know. Not for a second did I believe otherwise." Laura gave a slow nod. The tears started to come again, but she swallowed them back. No more. Enough already. They all looked at me, like I wasn't even human, like I was garbage. Stop, Sarah whispered. This'll pass. But Laura knew better. It doesn't just pass. Shame sticks. Especially when you're a young broke girl working in the home of the rich and powerful. Especially when you're a nobody. 3 months went by. Seattle in the fall was as gray and damp as ever. Wet leaves, sharp winds, low skies, and thoughts just as heavy and soggy as the streets. Laura picked up a job at an all-night diner off Pine Street. The place always smelled like grease, the stools wobbled, and the manager, Joe, thought harassment counted as flirting. She'd mop floors after her shift, sometimes at 2 or 3 in the morning. By the time she dragged herself home, there wasn't a drop left in her. Sarah would meet her with a hot mug of tea, sometimes with a hug, sometimes in silence. Never with questions. I just don't want you to break, her mother said one night, tucking a blanket around her. Everything out there, none of it defines who you are. Let them talk. What matters is who you are inside. But how do you remember that when strangers on the bus recognize you and turn away? How, when the neighbor mom whose kid you used to babysit suddenly pretends she doesn't know your name? People whispered. Someone must have leaked the story. Maybe a former employee. Maybe someone who read about it online. The maid who stole diamond earrings. The one who pocketed a $10,000 pair of Tiffany studs. No one cared that she cried. No one cared to hear her side of the story. They'd already made up their minds. Every day, Laura replayed it in her head. James Carlyle, standing in that doorway with that cold, distant stare, not one word in her defense, not a flicker of doubt. He looked at her like he wanted to erase her from his life entirely. And just the day before, he'd given her a book, an actual book, not a digital copy, with a note scribbled on the inside cover. You said you liked Fitzgerald. Thought you might find a little light in here. Light. The way Amanda's earrings sparkled in her palm now felt like a cruel joke. Weeks passed. Now Laura was working 2 jobs, day shifts at the cafe, graveyard shifts at a laundromat, the kind of work that numbed the mind, load, wait, fold, repeat, and maybe that was for the best. She started having dreams. The same ones, over and over. In one, she was standing in that living room again under James's stare. Only this time, she screamed that she was innocent. Screamed until her throat gave out. But no one heard her. In another, she was Amanda, dressed in an expensive gown. But when she looked in the mirror, there was nothing there. Just emptiness. She'd wake up soaked in sweat. Sometimes, when her mom was out at the farmer's market, Laura would sit on the windowsill with a cup of coffee and watch the rain streak the glass. She'd think about how unfair the world was, how fast people could turn on you, how your whole life could crumble if you wore the wrong clothes, came from the wrong zip code, had the wrong last name. One day she started writing a letter to James. You destroyed my life. I hope you sleep well knowing that. But she didn't finish it, tossed it in the trash before the ink dried. Even that felt pointless. Then Sunday came. It was cold, overcast. Sarah was baking cookies, the whole house filled with the warm scent of cinnamon. Laura was trying to read, but the words kept slipping away from her eyes like rain down a windshield. Someone's at the door, her mom said, wiping her hands on her apron. Laura stood up, walked to the front door, and froze. Standing on the porch was James Carlyle. No suit, just jeans and a jacket. His hair was a little windblown, and there was something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Guilt. Hi, Laura. His voice was unsteady. We need to talk. You? Laura's voice trembled. What are you? Why did you come? James Carlyle stood at the threshold of their small apartment, like a man who'd forgotten how to breathe. He didn't look like someone with private security, tailored suits, and people at his command. He looked like a man who'd just had the blinders ripped off his eyes. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Then finally, he exhaled. I know how this looks, but please just give me 1 minute. I need to say something, to you. Laura stood frozen, gripping the edge of the doorway, everything inside her clenched. Part of her wanted to slam the door in his face and never see him again, but another part echoed a line she once read in a book, "Find the light." She stepped back. Come in, but just for a minute. Sarah peeked into the living room from the kitchen, raising an eyebrow. Laura gave her a subtle nod. It's okay. Stay out of it. James sat down on the old leather couch, which let out a soft creak beneath him. He looked lost. I don't even know where to begin, he said, running a hand down his face. This is gonna sound like some bad movie plot. But damn it, sometimes the truth really is that ridiculous. No script, no logic. Laura sat across from him, her hands folded tightly on her lap. I'm listening, but don't you dare lie to me. I'm too tired for another lie. He nodded slowly. Remember that Saturday you were working in the second bedroom? Amanda said you went into her bathroom. I didn't. Laura's voice was sharp. Not her bathroom. Not her bedroom. I knew she didn't like me. I kept my distance. I know that now. He reached into the inside pocket of his coat and pulled out a slim flash drive. This is from the security system. The house was wired to a private network. Footage got uploaded to a server. I thought the files auto-deleted. Turns out, a tech accidentally saved the logs from that day. He was editing footage for my attorney. Long story. James took a deep breath. I saw Amanda open your locker in the changing room. Wearing gloves, the earrings were in her hand. Then she slipped them into your backpack. It's all there. Clear as day, down to the second. Silence dropped over the room like a weight. You could hear the kitchen faucet dripping in the background. She set me up on purpose? Laura's voice cracked. Yes. James looked down. She knew I'd started seeing you differently, that I liked you as a person. And Amanda, she doesn't handle competition, not even emotional. He let out a bitter laugh. She hated when I talked to you, when I looked at you. Even when I brought you coffee, you became a threat to her. And all you ever did was be yourself. Laura stood up, her whole body shaking. I lost my job, my reputation. People still avoid me. You stood there. You said nothing. You just fired me. I know, he whispered. God, Laura, I've been saying that to myself every night since. I didn't know what to believe. I was in shock. Amanda played it perfectly, and like a damn fool I bought it, because deep down, it was easier not to question it. He looked at her, straight into her eyes, and for once there was no trace of arrogance. I divorced her, officially. The papers were signed last week. She wasn't just stealing from you, she was stealing from me too. Emotionally, financially, in every possible way, I was blind. Laura stood by the window, her back to him. Her hands trembled. So what now? You came to say sorry? That's not enough. I didn't come just for that. He stood up. I want to make things right. I sent the footage to the police. All charges under your name. Gone. I wrote a formal statement for your college too. And I want to offer you your job back. Laura spun around. You're kidding, right? I know how it sounds, he said, raising his hands. But Amanda's gone. The house is empty. Everything's different. I have no one I trust in that house. I'm not offering you a favor. I'm asking for one. As a person. I'm not sure I can even walk back into that place. Not after everything. He stepped closer. Please, just think about it. You'll have real hours, respect, a contract, and pay higher than before. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Just the chance to be the man who should have stood up for you back then. They sat in silence for what felt like 10 minutes. The rain tapped lightly against the window. Sarah's footsteps echoed softly in the kitchen. Finally, Laura spoke. I don't want to go back there permanently. You don't have to, he said gently. Just, for now, until you find what you really want. No pressure. I just want to start making this right. You might pull it off, but not overnight. He nodded. That's fair. Laura studied him closely. He looked like a different man, human, worn out, alone. Okay, I'll think about it. But there are no second chances if anything shady happens again. There won't be, I promise. He left, placing the flash drive and a business card on the table. Laura stared at them for a long time. At the glossy letters, James A. Carlisle, founder and CEO. And for the first time in months, something stirred in her chest. Not trust, not hope, but curiosity. A week had passed. Laura hesitated. Every evening after work, she'd toss her keys on the shelf, glance at James's business card, and put off calling. Not because she didn't want to, but because she was scared. Scared of taking a step backward. Scared of getting burned again. Scared that the fragile respect just beginning to take root would be crushed all over again. But on Tuesday, he texted her first. I don't want to be pushy, but if you feel like stopping by, I'd love that. Just to talk. No pressure. No strings. Laura stared at the screen for a long moment. Then she stood up, grabbed her coat, picked up her keys, and walked out the door. The Carlisle house felt different now. No Amanda's car in the driveway, no shouting through the windows, no cloud of her overpowering French perfume. The whole space seemed to breathe again. The poison was gone. When James opened the door, he actually smiled. Just for a second, but there was something genuine in it. "Good to see you, Laura. Come in." She stepped inside. Everything looked familiar and yet completely new. No tension, no snide glances from upstairs. "Coffee? Tea? I still have some of that oolong you used to like." "Coffee's fine." She sat down on the couch, one she used to avoid. Now it felt comfortable, like home. He set a mug in front of her and sat across from her. "Thanks for coming. I know this can't be easy. You're stronger than most people I know, just for surviving all that." Laura smiled softly. "I wouldn't say I survived it, I just didn't give up. That's more than a lot of people manage." A quiet pause settled between them. "How'd you cope?" she asked suddenly. "After the divorce, with the loneliness?" He shrugged. "I didn't really. I just learned to drown out the silence, played music, buried myself in work. And then one day, I found that note you left. Remember? You stuck it in a book? There's still light, even in the dark?" "Yeah." He gave a half laugh. "I only found it recently. Weird, huh?" After that, I went back and looked at the footage from that day. Amanda. Everything. It all crumbled in my head like a house of cards. I realized I'd put my trust in the wrong person. And I lost. Laura lowered her gaze. "I used to dream about this house. Only in the dream, it was completely empty, but it still smelled like her perfume." "You know," he said quietly, "I burned everything that belonged to her. Clothes, jewelry, even the chair in her office. I wanted this place to feel clean again." Silence. The tea cooled in its cup while a light snow fell outside the window, rare for Seattle this time of year. Everything felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something big to happen. "I want to show you something," James said, standing up. "If you're up for it, I remodeled the library. Remember how it used to be all dark with those heavy curtains?" "Oh yeah, it was awful. Not anymore." They walked upstairs, past Amanda's old bedroom. Thankfully, the door was closed. Laura felt oddly grateful for that. The library, though, was completely transformed. Light walls, wooden shelves, lush green plants. The scent of cinnamon candles drifted in the air. "This is kind of my thinking space now," James said. "Sometimes I read. Sometimes I just sit." He walked over to a box of books by the wall. "I've been going through old family photos. Want to see?" "Sure." They sat on the soft rug side by side. He opened a photo album. The pages rustled like echoes from the past. Pictures of James as a kid, his father, and a woman with piercing eyes. "Is that your mom?" "Yeah, I barely remember her. Dad always said she left us. I was really young." He turned the page, then froze. Laura noticed the shift. "What is it?" "Wait." He pulled out a photo, staring at it like he couldn't believe his eyes. This is me." "But..." He looked at her, completely stunned. "Where did you get this?" That's from our house," Laura said, her voice suddenly thin. "That's my mom, and the boy in the picture, that's my brother. He disappeared. Her husband, my dad, took him when I was 3. We tried everything, police, private investigators, but he changed his name and left. No one could find him." James staggered back a step, like the air had been knocked from his lungs. This can't be. "Wait, are you saying..." He pointed at the woman in the photo. "That's Sarah Bailey?" "Yes, that's my mom." Silence. Laura felt the air vanish from the room. Words hung like lightning right before the thunder strikes. "James, are you saying you might be my brother?" He sat back down, pressing his fingers to his temples. "This is insane, but it all adds up. Everything. My mom, my real mom, her name was Sarah. My dad's name was Richard. He changed our last name to Carlisle when we moved to Illinois, then later Seattle." Laura covered her mouth. "Oh my God." He looked at her, eyes filling, not with pain, but realization. "All this time, you were right here. And I fired you, I accused you, I humiliated you. I lived my life not knowing I had a sister." "Laura," she nodded slowly, like in a dream. "We need to talk to my mom." "Our mom," she whispered. And James nodded too. Not as a businessman. Not as the owner of a mansion. But as a brother. The whole way to Laura's house, they drove in silence. Street lights flashed by the windows, and the wet asphalt reflected them like a mirror. Inside the car, silence, but not awkward. It was the silence of waiting, of realization, of anticipation for something that would change everything. James kept his hand on the steering wheel, but his fingers were trembling. He stared straight ahead, as though afraid to look back, even in the reflection of the rearview mirror. Laura sat beside him, clutching a photo to her chest, the one where little James stands next to young Sarah. Brother and sister, separated by a decade of lies. She still bakes those orange muffins, Laura said quietly, breaking the silence. Always on Sundays. I think she's made some today. She doesn't like it when the fridge is empty, probably from stress. I don't remember the taste of her baking, James whispered. Only the smell. Sometimes I dream about it. You'll remember now, she said, placing her hand on his shoulder. When they reached the door, Laura stopped, took a deep breath. Are you sure? I have to, James said, looking at the wooden door as if it were a gateway to another world. She unlocked it. A creak, the familiar hallway, the calm before the storm. Mom, I'm home, she called out. In the kitchen. I'm getting the muffins out, came a voice full of life and exhaustion. They walked inside. Sarah stood by the oven in a cozy robe and slippers. The light from the lamp cast soft shadows on her. In her hands was a baking sheet with hot muffins. She looked up, smiled when she saw her daughter, and froze when she saw the man behind her. Mom? Laura stepped aside. This is James. Sarah dropped the oven mitt, her eyes widened, pupils narrowing. She slowly stepped forward as if afraid it was a dream. James? Her voice trembled. Oh my God, is it really you? He looked at her, as if seeing a photograph come to life. Mom? And in that moment, everything fell apart. Sarah covered her mouth with her hands, sobbing, and with shaky steps ran to him. He embraced her, the kind of hug you give only to someone you've been waiting for 20 years. She stroked his hair, his face as if not believing it. He stood there holding her close like a child. I thought you were dead, Sarah whispered through her tears. He said I'd never see you again. I didn't remember. I didn't know, James whispered back. He said you left us. He choked up. He wouldn't even let me say your name. He called you a mistake. Laura stood in the doorway, wiping away her tears, not interfering. In that moment, she was witnessing a miracle. They sat down at the table. The muffins remained on the tray. Coffee had gone cold in their cups, but no one felt hungry. We moved to Illinois when I was 7, James started. Then Dad changed our last name, took out a loan, and opened a store. He was strict, very strict, but always smiled around strangers. He never let me ask about the past. He threatened me, Sarah said. He said if I went to court, he'd take you to Canada or Mexico. I tried to fight, but the lawyer said I had no chance, especially without money. He had connections. And she lowered her head. I gave up. I put out ads, wrote to newspapers, called, then I lost the trail. James nodded. I found his will 6 months ago. He died of a heart attack. In his papers, there was a copy of my old birth certificate. It had the name Sarah Bailey. That's when I saw it. I thought it was a mistake until I got to Laura's house. Until I saw that photograph. Sarah ran her hand over his cheek. You grew up, so beautiful, so strong. God, if I had only known. And you were always there, he said, turning to Laura. And I never suspected. You worked in my house, suffering from the lies Amanda planted. And you didn't know you were firing your own sister, Sarah added. All of this, it's like cruel irony. No, Mom, it's not irony, it's a chance, James said, squeezing their hands tightly. I don't want to lose anyone anymore. Later, when Sarah fell asleep, exhausted from the emotions, Laura and James stayed in the kitchen. They drank tea, like real brother and sister, no more awkwardness. I remember, you, Laura said, looking into her cup. The little you. You'd build towers with blocks and always cover for me when I snuck into the jam cupboard. And you kept hiding the keys to my truck, he smiled, because you were afraid I'd leave. And you left anyway. They exchanged a glance. The pain was still there, deep inside, but now it could be shared. I want to fix everything, James said seriously. I want you to never need anything again, for Mom to live in a decent house, for us to have a chance, a real family. I didn't find you for the money, she said. I know, that's exactly why you deserve it. He stood up and went to the fridge, opened it, and quietly laughed. Muffins, orange ones, there they are, now I remember. Laura stepped up, try one. He took a bite, closed his eyes, and whispered, tastes like childhood. Then he added, next time, I'll bring you my favorite childhood toy. I've kept it. I named it Lori. I think now I understand why. And that night, after 20 years of separation, the doors of the past finally opened. And behind them was a place where they could finally become a family again. A week had passed since that fateful meeting when the past stormed into Sarah's house, shaking everything up, but leaving behind light. Laura's world, once fragile like a house of cards, began to rebuild itself. But this time it wasn't based on lies, but on truth. On love, on blood, on family. The house, which had once been just a temporary refuge, had now become the heart. Sarah was making breakfast, dancing around to old music playing from the speakers. She wore a bright robe with a pattern of oranges, a gift from James. She used to be embarrassed to wear something so bold. Not anymore. Now she could wear anything. Laura woke up early. For the first time in a long time, it wasn't because of anxiety or a nightmare about earrings in her pocket, but from the smell of fresh coffee and voices coming from the kitchen. Voices of family. James was already sitting at the table in a simple dark blue sweater, almost as if he wanted to blend into this cozy, almost cliché scene. He was peeling an orange and arguing with Sarah about how much sugar to add to the pancakes. 3 spoons, no less, Sarah insisted. That's dessert, not breakfast, he laughed. Laura quietly stood in the doorway watching, and her heart filled with something she had almost forgotten. Gratitude. Just for this moment. For this ordinary, wonderful, nothing special breakfast. Good morning, family, she said, yawning. Sit down, sis, James replied. I went with 2 spoons of sugar. Compromise. Impressive, she smirked and sat at the table. You could have just called the chefs from the mansion. No, he waved it off. Everything related to that house, I'm rethinking, including the chefs, and the furniture. And, he paused. Everything. Completely. Later that day, the 3 of them went to the Carlisle mansion, officially, to grab some documents and tie up loose ends. Unofficially, to close a chapter. The mansion had already been put up for sale. The spacious rooms felt foreign, like they had emptied along with Amanda's departure. The emptiness echoed with every step. Sarah froze by the staircase. This house feels like a tomb, she muttered. It always was, James nodded. Beautiful, sterile, cold. You can't imagine how much I dreamed of just having tea in a kitchen where someone's banging around in the cabinets. Like at your place, Mom. He opened a drawer in the hallway and pulled out a folder. He handed it to Laura. These are the documents, financial arrangements. From now on, you have an account where the funds have been transferred. Not a handout. This is your compensation for everything. For the humiliation, the tears, the stolen opportunities. I was blind, and I don't want to be that way anymore. Laura was silent for a long moment. Then she closed the folder and placed it on the table. I'll take this, not as compensation, but as an investment, in the future. Ours. James smiled. You've always been wiser than me. When they got home, they threw a little celebration. Sarah put on a fancy dress, even though no guests were expected. James and Laura went out to get flowers and a new tablecloth. Everything looked simple. But that was where the magic was. On the table, Sarah's roast chicken recipe, muffins of course, and wine. Not expensive, but chosen with care. 3 utensils, 3 napkins, and 1 photograph, the same one now in a new frame. It sat in the middle of the table. Do you think, Laura asked, Dad would be proud of us? Sarah looked at the photo and smiled through her tears. He would have finally stopped being afraid. And now we're a family, right? James asked. Again? No, Laura said. Not again. We are, for the first time, for real. No secrets. No lies. They clinked their glasses. Later, when the evening turned into late night and Sarah had gone to bed, Laura and James stepped out onto the balcony. Below, the late city buzzed. Somewhere, a dog was barking. A cyclist with an Uber Eats backpack passed by. Everything, as usual. But now that usual didn't scare her. It felt like home. I want to invest in a fund, James said suddenly. For girls like you, who have nowhere to turn when the system breaks them. How about we call it Laura's Heart? He looked at her. Would you mind? Only if you're in too. Let's call it the heart of the family. No last names, just the essence. They laughed. When Laura went to bed that night, she didn't lock the door for the first time in months. Not from trust, but from certainty. In this apartment, in this home, in this new world, she no longer feared danger. And before she fell asleep, she took out that same photograph, the one where it all began. Now it stood in a delicate wooden frame on her nightstand. Next to it was another, today's photo. 3 people sitting at the table, laughing, smiling. Mother, brother, sister, and finally a real family.